All right, the shallots have been roasted. They are nice and soft and tender. And I'm going to pull them out of the oven. I just checked them. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by soft and tender, but not overcooked, okay? Let's just take a couple shallots out first. Remember, you see how it's kind of mushing it around like that there, and it's soft. It's soft, tender enough to eat is what it is, okay? But not so tender that they're falling apart to that extent. But I have to cook them as much as I did, okay? Now, here's what I'm going to show you what to do with the shallots. Of course, you will find throughout this course that there are many recipes that call for roasted shallots as part of the recipe or as an option. And once you make these the first time and you taste them, you're going to understand why right away, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the shallots. Remember, we cooked these in that nice brown butter. So we have brown butter in the juice. I'm not saying that you have to do what I did with the brown butter. I just took advantage of it, just to show that you need to have a little bit of flexibility. And understanding that brown butter is good, and many recipes call for it because it tastes good, would have automatically told you, like it did me, that, hey, I didn't burn the butter, I can still use it. And that's what I really want you to learn from that. Okay, now I have this really, really delicious juice right here. Now, I'm going to give this a taste, as it is. I got to tell you something. I'm not going to do anything to this at all. This already tastes perfect. The little bit of salt and pepper and the thyme and the butter and the olive oil combination made this complete. Now, one thing I could do, and I'll show you in terms of using this as a juice or a sauce. You see how that has a little bit of consistency? It's kind of in between a sauce and a juice right now. And that's fine. This would be great for steaks or grilled chicken and fowl. Now, the other obvious option, when you refer back to the sauce making finishing processes that we did in the Stocks and Sauces DVDs, was that the buttering this, or adding chopped parsley to this, or throwing some capers into it, or however you wanted to finish it. And it's finished just the way it is. But it can be buttered a little bit if you want to. And this is all the juice you're ever going to need. Now, you have a paper towel? Louis, give me a little paper towel over there. I want to show you a little trick, particularly in this particular kind of case, where you have a juice that has oil or butter fat in it, where with a sauce, it would be absorbed and be part of the sauce. You'd never even know the oil and fat was in there. But in the case of a juice, sometimes when you put it on a plate, and this is fine, it has a little bit of oil on it, and I think it's important for you to understand another little trick. So sometimes you might want to take away a look that I'll temporarily call greasy, okay? Which someone might refer to it like that if they saw it and there was a little bit of fat on their plate mixed in with the juice. So what you can do sometimes is just take a little paper towel, because the grease always comes to the top, okay? And just hit the top of it a little bit with a paper towel, and the only thing it's usually going to grab up is the fat. You see, this is all fat right here, okay? Which is either olive oil or the butter fat. You can do this right inside the saucepan itself, the little saute pan or whatever you're going to do, or whatever you happen to be using, rather. And now you've eliminated the greasy look to the finished product on the plate, okay? So this, like I said, didn't need anything. So there you have it, some roasted shallots, which you certainly could just, of course, take this juice, pour it right over this, take a little bit of chopped parsley, sprinkle it on it, and theoretically, and beyond theoretically, in reality, you certainly could serve this as a vegetable, believe it or not, with dinner, as a roasted onion. And people would go nuts over this, but you'd only do this if you were having some kind of grilled or roasted meats on the table with this, and then people would just love this with that. They by themselves are incredibly delicious, and something you need to understand as a good cook in your repertoire. So enjoy learning about the shallots and trying them for the first time if you haven't had them, and you're going to love them. you know, I got so carried away there, wrapping up the shallot thing, because these things are so good, and that juice was so nice, and I loved it. But what I loved about it, really, that kind of takes me away from concentrating sometime on what I'm teaching you, is your learning and enjoyment of trying something like this for the first time, and what it's like to, you know, learn something that you didn't know you didn't know. And if you haven't had these and you try them, you'll see what I mean. So anyway, back to what I was saying earlier on in this particular lesson about the shallots, about other onions and what to do, is you see the way I roasted the shallots in the oven in a little bit of juice. I want you to think about all onions, whether they be white onions, boiling onions, large Spanish onions, which are the three primaries right there. I want you to think of them all in one kind of way. You can take any of those onions and just lay them on a little cookie sheet or sheet pan, half sheet pan, or put them in on some metal vessel, and just place them in the oven at a low temperature and roast them in the skins. Now, I could have roasted the shallots in the skins, but I wouldn't have got that brownness that I want. Now, when it comes to larger onions, like a whole medium or large, you normally would use a medium-sized Spanish onion for this if you were going to roast a Spanish onion. In the case of the Spanish onion, you can't brown them because the length of time it takes to cook them, you have a tendency, if you cook them in the oven roasting without the skins, like we did this, they have a tendency to fall apart on you and you lose the quality of the onion. One of the things that you get by roasting a white boiling onion or a white onion or a dry Spanish onion in an oven with their skins on is you get to keep them intact. So you roast them until they're nice and soft and tender, and all that juice and sugar that comes out of the onion becomes part of the experience of eating that onion later because it's cooked and self-contained by the skin. What happens is you cook them until they're soft and tender. You take them out, you let them cool for a while, you cut them in half, and then you carefully peel them and leave the stems and the root intact, the little fuzzy part and then the pointed part at the bottom, to kind of hold these half onions together. And you can lay these half onions out on a plate and serve them with a little bit of melted butter, salt, pepper, and parsley on them, and they're absolutely delicious. The point that I want to make about roasting shallots or roasting onions, and this is just another onion, is that what you do to one, in most cases, you can do to another. They're all good if they're properly roasted. So just keep in mind that if you like these shallots, you'll love playing around with the roasted onions, both the white boiling onions, as they're called, which when you roast whole, by the way, are ideal for garnish for stews and ragouts and things like that. Or the white onions, which are not ideal for that because they're too big, or the dry Spanish onions. So have fun with your onions, but the roasted shallots, they're just killer.